Hello everybody, my name is Rainer Michaeli. I'm the director of the Institute for Competitive Intelligence, and it's my pleasure today to host a session about conversational intelligence. Wow, this might sound a little bit strange, but in the end you will see that this is a pretty hot topic within competitive intelligence, and I'm very proud that we have a subject matter expert with me today, and this is Mr. Kent Potter. Kent, so make some noise that I know that you're there.
I am here. Thank you, Rainer. It's good to be here, everyone. I look forward to sharing this hour with you. We will have time for questions at the end. Of course, if you have questions during the course of this, feel free to go ahead and type something in the chat box, and we'll see it.
Yes. So thank you very much. It's not that we're sitting opposite, so I'm here in Germany and Kent is somewhere out there in the woods in the US. So chances are we have every now and then some discussion, but we will do it like that. I'll open the session with a quick word of introduction, and then it's all yours, Kent, and you can really present your case, and then we take the questions as they come. And you indicated already we have a communication tool. This is a chat box that everybody should see on the right-hand side of the screen or the bottom part of your little panel. And this is where you can pose your questions pretty much. Okay, so quick word about the ICI. That's the Institute for Competitive Intelligence. We are all about training, certification, education in competitive intelligence. Along these sort of up-to-date subjects, we try to be state-of-the-art. And this includes, of course, some engagement with university, academia, and experts in the field. And this is how we came up with this idea of live webinars. So this is really live as we speak. Kind of a monthly series we introduced. And we try to pick really the hot topics, not just the kind of fringe issues about our subject, but really one of the hot topics we can imagine, and you can imagine, is all about getting information from the field, from human beings. And obviously there pops up a whole lot of questions about ethics, about how do we do it, and can we really use it, and should we use it, and we all know about scandals in the field. So this is really something I like to talk about and hear from an expert like Kent for today of what his opinion is, and of course what the methodology is that he applies. Quick word about his background. Kent Potter, this is. He has pretty much a three-pillar background, if I dare say. That's how I would call it. So he worked in industry during his career. A name like Bell 1000, the S comes up, where he was helping and effective in setting up intelligence units. He has a second pillar. This is pretty much the US Army, where he served as an intelligence officer for quite some time. And his third, career or line of career is pretty much the entrepreneurial strike with a consulting background. So he heads at this moment of time the Benyon Group in the US, which does, and he can definitely add a little bit to this later on, consulting, research, and coaching education in the field of competitive intelligence. Okay, and this is pretty much where we are, Kent. I think now it's a good idea that you jump in and really take over the session and guide us through your idea of conversational intelligence.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you, Rainer. Well, I wish I could see all of you, but I'm glad that you can't see me. This is an important subject for competitive intelligence, and also for any time you're trying to get good market intelligence from customers, suppliers, or anyone of that sort. The question arises, how do you get people to talk to you about very sensitive things without lying, without crossing boundaries that you really shouldn't cross? So conversational intelligence is actually a form of elicitation, which was developed years ago by various professionals in both in government but also in business, information technology, and other areas, to address a simple question, which is, or simple problem, which is that typically when you ask someone a direct question, you presume immediately that they share the same reasons for talking to you that you share for speaking with them, that they share your goals, your interests, and your designs on that conversation. That's not always the case, of course. So unfortunately, over the years, many people have resorted to different varieties of trickery to get people to tell them things about their markets, their companies, and so on. And none of that is what we're teaching you here today. Rather, we're teaching you or outlining for you a methodology that permits you to develop win-win or, at worst, win-neutral conversations with people. You should never have a win-lose conversation using these techniques. Nothing that you do using our techniques that we're going to teach you here today will get you in the bad guy column on the front page of your local business paper. It simply won't happen. What we're teaching you are things that work, that have been, in fact, they've been taught to thousands of people around the world, salespeople, people in supply chain, and competitor intelligence, customer intelligence, etc. So let's start out by talking about what it is that you need to know. So if you're in sales, of course, you want to know what two customers' needs are. If you're in market analysis, you want to know about competitors, maybe you want to know about suppliers. How do we go about getting that information? I remember years ago working for the director of marketing of an IT firm. I was the deputy director, and I came into his office one day and heard him speaking in a very high, squeaky voice. And I couldn't understand exactly what that was about until I listened to the conversation for a moment he was having. He was attempting to impersonate a student at a local university calling a competitor company to find out about some of their bidding secrets on a particular deal. That's ridiculous. Of course, that sort of thing doesn't work. Many people get this by just calling and asking questions, but that doesn't seem to work either. So our objectives today are to use some new techniques for getting information. Some of these you may have heard or tried in the past, but we've put them into a framework that we have found to be supremely successful in almost every case. We're actually planning on giving you a little bit of homework at the end of this assignment. We find that only if you try things out do you end up being able to retain what you learn. So there's two slides in particular. If you look in the lower left-hand corner of the slide now on the screen, you'll see the number 4. When we get to slide number 21 or slide number 25, either of those, or both of those, please take careful notes. I'll pause because we'll give you a little bit of homework afterwards and let you try some of this on your own. So the point at the bottom of the screen here about bicycle riding and rock climbing is some of what we're going to teach you is actually very counterintuitive. You might know this, but the number of decisions that a small child's brain makes when they're riding a bicycle actually exceeds 250 decisions per minute. These aren't conscious, but they're very rapid-fire, unconscious choices that have to be made to keep you upright on two wheels. Similarly, when we talk about these techniques that we're sharing with you today, you will discover that they seem a little overwhelming. It seems like there's a lot of things we're asking you to do and to remember. But like a small child on a bicycle, once you've gotten used to it, it'll come naturally, and if you practice, it'll be easy. The second point is about rock climbing. Some of you may have in your life attempted to try rappelling down the face of a cliff, wrapping a rope around a strong anchor at the top and then dropping down the face of a cliff, lowering yourself using a method called rappelling. You may have discovered that if you try to stand vertically on the cliff face and lower yourself that way, you feel very unstable and you are in fact in a dangerous position. What in fact you need to do is lean out into space and wrap the rope in a particular way so as to arrest your descent. This is not intuitive. It's not what we think we should be doing, and what we're going to be teaching you is going to be counterintuitive. So what is it that is feasible, what is not feasible in terms of this process? We can teach you tools that are sufficiently accurate that you'll be able to identify market strategies, estimate costs, get information you need to map out how people make choices, but we'll never be able to get you so much information that no estimation is needed. That would be called corporate espionage. It's remarkable how much you actually can get through this process, though. Most of the good information you will be gathering, of course, comes from human beings, not the web, not printed materials, and not something that was created for public consumption by your target. You want to be talking, yes?
Just a quick question. It's still on page 1 that you're presenting, right?
No, I apparently had the screen paused.
Sorry for that. So we're just screen 1 seen, but you went already through some screens, right?
I'm
now
already up to
screen 6. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
So please continue, or
my
just
apologies.
go back a little bit and see what we've just missed.
Okay. So all that you missed was these slides, which I'm leafing through. Okay, here we go. What is feasible? Okay, and you'll see a slide number in the lower left-hand corner, and that's was my reference to slides 21 and 25. Okay?
Yes.
All right, very well. So what you really want is the information on the inner core of your target organizations. And yet, if you simply call up the people that you know have the information, perhaps at the innermost ring of your competitor target, for instance, they simply won't talk to you on a normal basis. However, the people who talk to them, their customers, their vendors and partners, regulators and others, are often very willing to talk to you if you set it up right. But this can be just a little bit difficult. So what we're teaching here is not corporate espionage. It's not like Slimy Sam here selling his ancient reels of magnetic computer tape. There's no deception, exploitation involved, nothing hidden, covert, or illegal about it. We do want to build win-win relationships. We can do this using this technique called conversational intelligence. However, and the techniques that we're going to be using will never harm your source. This is a key thing. We're not going to teach you anything that you wouldn't want your mother to know, or that it would harm your company if it appeared in the front page of the Wall Street Journal. There is an ethical way forward, and it is a way that will also retain your network of contacts and turn them into effective intelligence sources. Now, here's an important point about that. Many people are in such a rush to get the information that they feel that they urgently need for their business case that they will, in fact, kill the goose who lays the golden egg. Of course, you probably know this old story. It comes, I believe, from Germany, in fact, about the farmer who had a goose that laid golden eggs. This farmer discovered that this was a great source of wealth, of course, and decided to take the goose apart to see how it laid those eggs, but much to his dismay, that killed the goose. Your network is the goose. The information that your sources in your network possess are, in fact, the golden eggs. This means that if you want to keep getting information from your network, if you want to use sources over and over, there must be something in it for them. That is a key differentiator between this sort of elicitation, as we teach it in conversational intelligence, and every other kind. Win-win or win-neutral relationships. So before you get started, of course, you do need to know exactly what it is that you need. You have to be very precise about that and specifically determine who it is that is most likely to know the information that you need. However, as you go forward with this, bear in mind that, as Stephen R. Covey taught, slow with people is fast, and fast with people is slow. The more that you rush sources in your efforts to obtain the information that you want, the more likely it is that these very same sources will become concerned. They will feel that this is not a win-win or even a win-neutral relationship. They will feel exploited, and then they will shut you down. Normal conversations with people that involve a lot of questions feel a little bit like sitting in a dentist chair getting your cavities drilled with no anesthetic. You ask a question, they may answer. That sounds interesting, so you ask a more detailed question, they answer again. Can you hear the drill starting? You ask a more detailed question, they answer again. By this time, they're looking for the exit. Instead, the intelligence approach thinks win-win from the start, relies upon principles of psychology, and involves careful planning to make certain that you're addressing the needs of the other person and their interests as well as your own. That makes sure that it does not turn into something that feels and in fact is very exploitative. Note that in a normal conversation, contacts tend to be planned, but conversations are unplanned. This is one of those counterintuitive things. If you fail to plan your actual conversation, you will not be successful in getting the information you want. It simply won't happen. You have to do more than decide who you want to talk to, but rather how you're going to talk to them and what's in it for them. I'd like you to take now to think, if you would, about what are the best elements of information that you ever received. Think about your personal life, perhaps a house for sale or an apartment you wanted to rent, perhaps even an introduction to your spouse or significant other. Think about a job. Where did you get the information? If we could have a show of hands, I would bet you that the majority of you on this call find that your best information comes from people you know. Okay, maybe it comes through Facebook, but that's someone that you know. It either comes through conversation or direct contact, one-on-one, in which you reach out to your network or have a conversation that gives you the information that you need. This tends also to be very true in business as well. In fact, those of you who are in the information research business probably know that at least half the time when you come into the CEO's office with a wonderful report on certain conditions in the market, you get waved away with, "I heard something different at the club or on the golf course." They got something from a friend that has more credibility than the information they're getting from you, unless you can beat that with better sources. How do you find those sources? How do you go about that? So this slide, rather ugly picture of a close-up of a giraffe's snout, is our way of talking about that. Let's say that in my backyard in Utah, in the United States, I had a giraffe. Now, that wouldn't work very well. The neighbors would notice. But giraffes need to eat certain diets of leaves and twigs and so forth, and my giraffe is sick, and I don't know what to feed him. If I asked any one of you directly, what should I feed my giraffe? How do I take care of my sick giraffe? And most of you would probably say, I really don't know. I don't really have an answer to that question. You'll have to ask someone else. If I said, do you know anyone who knows how to feed a sick giraffe? Again, you might say, I really don't know, Kent. It's a silly question. Why you asked me in the first place? Or probably you'd say, look it up online. That's almost the universal answer these days. But assuming the internet were not available, and as far as the best business information, the internet is not your best source. If you wanted to find this information out about how to feed a giraffe and there's no internet, I might ask you a question like this. Philip or John or Cliff or Lorraine, any of you on this call, if I asked you, how can I feed a giraffe, I would ask it a little differently. I would say, you know, I've got a giraffe in my backyard, and I need to know what to feed it. Do you happen to know anyone who might know the kinds of people who could answer me this question, how do I feed my giraffe? If you think about it, many of you would right away say, I don't know anyone like that, but I know someone who does. There's this fellow at the local university, or perhaps the local zoo, or my favorite veterinarian. Any of those persons could probably tell you who to go to. That is exactly the point. So often in business, we'll say, who can answer this question? And we get a blank stare and no information back. But if we say, whom do you know who can answer this question? You get a completely different result. That is a very rapid way of finding sources. Whom do you know who? Another excellent question is, I wonder how I could find this out, or I wonder who might be able to tell me, or who inside your company might tell me the answer to my question. All of these are how do you feed a giraffe type of questions and answers. So how do we actually do this? If we find the right sources, how do we get them to talk to us, maintain the contact, and manage the process? Now, if I asked you this question, most of you would be shocked, dismayed, and probably immediately leave the call. And please, don't anybody start typing the answer into the chat box. I really don't want to know. The reason I'm using this question is if you ask a question like this, how is your sex life? Most people really wonder what it is we're asking about, why now, why in a public forum, and what I'll do with the information. Cognitive psychologists tell us that whenever someone asks a question, it immediately spawns a process in the listener's mind along the lines of, why are you asking, and what will you do with the information? You tend to get back not information that's clear, but rather spin. I'm going to tell you just the information I want you to know, or I'll shut you down entirely. Interviews, in fact, I'm sorry, I went a little too far there. Interviews, in fact, do require supporting relationships that may not be present with the people when you start out trying to talk to people that have the information that you need. We've already talked about this a bit, so I'll go to the next slide. We call this the inverse Radio Shack approach. You may not be aware of this, those of you that are not in the United States, but the Radio Shack chain of stores had an ad campaign called, "You've got questions, we've got answers." The inverse approach flips that. Rather, what we want to do is think hard about the targets we're going to be talking to, what it is that they need and want, and then plan a specific type of conversation that will elicit the information that you need most effectively from them. Critically, you need to plan this in such a way that it is a good time for the person you're speaking to. We'll talk a little bit about that. And invert the role of questions and statements. What do I mean by that? Typically, in any conversation, statements are used for conversational flow and questions are used to obtain information. What if you turn that around? What if instead of asking questions to get information, you use questions for conversational flow and statements to get information? For example, and I know that Lorraine is on the phone, and I know Lorraine, so don't answer Lorraine. But Lorraine, if I said, where do you come from? Or when did you graduate from high school? You might not immediately answer me, especially since that would tend to be indicative of your age, for example, if you wanted to protect that. But if I said, well, Lorraine, you know, I graduated from high school in 1972, so I'm sure I'm older than you, that might elicit a response. You would give me some sort of response back. You'd tell me I'm wrong, or I'm right, or you'd say something else that would lead me in the right direction. That is inverting the role of questions and statements to get information. I'm sharing information typically, or using one of several tools to frame a statement that gets the other party talking. Does this work? Yes, indeed. As a general rule, I don't practice this on every airplane flight that I take, but a few years ago, for example, flying out of the city of Detroit, I had a conversation in the United States. I had a conversation with someone in which they asked what I was doing on this particular business trip, and I told him that I was, quote, teaching salespeople how to get sensitive information from normal conversations like the one you and I are having right now. I thought that was probably fair warning. This fellow then struck up a conversation with me, or I with him, and we chatted for a bit. And within 20 minutes, he told me about a new technology that his company was trying to sell to some American car companies in the Detroit area, precisely how much that technology costs to install per car, and what their profit margin was on it. And he ended with the statement, "I hope none of my competitors find this out because we'd be sunk." Of course, I did not call and tell any of his competitors, as it was just a trial run. You can, in fact, get a tremendous amount of similar sensitive information, so much so that we encourage people who take our courses to make an agreement that they will never use this for inappropriate reasons. Why do people talk? Lots of reasons. They talk to be noticed. They talk to correct error, to gossip, to build common cause against foes. But there's 5 basic steps that we typically use in order to help grease the skids, if you will, to help prepare the ground and then facilitate the conversation. This is one of those places I said you should probably pause and take out a piece of paper and take some notes. This is a critical thing. The very first of these 5 steps is to suspend the ego. It's not about you. Your head is full of the information that you want to gather from your source, from your target, but it's just simply not about you. It's about them. What is it that they want? What is it that they need? If you don't start out thinking about that, you will never be successful getting the information you want. You also have to think about how to protect them. This suggests, by the way, that going directly head-on at competitors is not the right way to start. You want to start rather obliquely. You can, of course, talk to competitor A about competitor B and so forth, but this is the peeling the onion that we talked about a little bit earlier. Talk about people they sell to or buy from, etc. It's not about you. Understand your source. FRED is an acronym that we'll introduce in just a moment. Understand them deeply and well. Plan your conversation in accordance with the specific shape. We call it the hourglass shape. Be sure to invert your questions and statements, invert the role of them in this conversation, and always give to get. Make sure that they're getting something out of this conversation. Never win-lose, never deceive are the final 2 points. Okay, so who is Fred? Fred, if there's a Fred on the call, my apologies in advance. It's a fine name. Fred actually is not this fellow. Fred is any potential collector, correspondent, or source, and this is what FRED stands for. Facts, relationship, employment and background, and desires. Before you approach someone, you have to have a good idea that they know what you need. What is it that you think they do know? Even perhaps more importantly, whom do they know, and to whom can they introduce you? Where do they fit in their personal network? In our longer course with ICI, we teach, in fact, how to identify the best network positions where you can work with people to get introduced to the right people, and how to identify who is in those roles. What sort of background do they have? Not just their employment, although that's critical, but where did they go to school, to university? What sort of interests do they have? Fortunately, with current social networking media, we can find out a great deal of this online. But we can also find it out from talking to people that know this source on our way to them. What do they want? This is typically a supposition on our part until we have started our discussion with them. But what do they want and need, and how can I help them? With this in mind, and knowing something about their background, we usually have some clue about what it is that will get them to talk. and what it is that we can share with them to make them feel like their speaking with us is productive. And then, of course, how must we protect them? This is the second slide I mentioned that you might want to take some notes on. This is the famous hourglass shape, pioneered by my friend and neighbor, former neighbor, John Nolan. The paradigm here is that you start conversations. Before you start conversations, actually, let's look at the box on the right. You need to make a plan. This is what we've already talked about, who has the information and what's in it for them. Think about it. Your very first call, again in the box on the right, or conversation with someone is Fred. If possible, you try not to gather the information that you most want in the first meeting. If what you want to know is margin on a particular product or market share or how something is performing in a market, or if on the supply side, perhaps something about the strength of their internal supply lines and production, you don't start out with that. You start out making a contact, establishing your bona fides, why should they talk to you, and asking permission to have another discussion with them if it's a phone call, or if you meet them on a trade show floor or something of that nature, becoming somewhat acquainted with them. This then allows you to do further planning, more planning later, allowing you to think about how to approach them for the collection mission. This is the next contact that you make. Trying to get everything in the first contact is a fundamental flaw in this sort of intelligence collection. It normally fails. The paradigm is whether you're having a Fred conversation or a collection conversation, you follow the hourglass format on the left. You start out with general conversation, you establish rapport, you shift your conversation to the topic of interest, you make a statement or two, and then you shift away. It's not a simple hourglass. It tends to go in and out as you shift into a topic and shift back out. But never hold this conversation long enough that they start feeling like they're in that dentist chair getting drilled again. Even if you are using statements, too many statements in rapid fire and too little attention to their needs and interests will take you to a position that you don't want to be, where they feel exploited. So hopefully you've got some good notes, and we'll go on. Converting questions to statements. We've already discussed this, actually, a little bit earlier. So now is the critical part. Sorry. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Give to get. Give something to get something. It's the obvious counterbalance. Now, there are several important pieces to this that I think we need to touch on. This is the most important role that the Internet and the information that's available on the web can play for you in your research. Not on giving you the information that you need typically, since we've already said that most of that is going to come from human beings, but rather on giving you grist for the conversational mill, the sort of background that you need going into a conversation to have a successful one. We already talked about using social networks to find out your Fred information about your contact. But also, if you have a few snippets that you've gotten off the web, for example, about what's going on in that company lately. I'm in Minneapolis today getting ready to meet with a company which I shall not name, but it's a major American company with many billions of dollars of business worldwide. This company recently started having some difficulties in innovating as rapidly as some of their competitors, and they've lost both market share and market capitalization as a result. My knowledge of that will enable me in my conversations with an executive in just another hour and a half from now to elicit some information about what their challenges are in this company. Not by pointing out their flaws, but simply because I know this, I can plan a conversation to tactfully discuss possible market challenges where we can very possibly help them. I already know something about their company, or at least I think I do. I might be wrong, but the information is right there on the web for the asking. Again, it gets them talking. That's what it's for. Any of you who have ever been interviewed by the press know very well that journalists, and I used to be one, so I'm not just slamming journalists, rarely get it right to the satisfaction of their sources. Whenever I've read a press interview or written one when I was a member of the press, I found that I was dissatisfied if a source, or my sources were dissatisfied if I was the writer. It seems that in the press, we just can't get it right. We're just unable to get the answers on paper to the questions that we ask our sources, at least to their satisfaction. So if the person you're talking to has, if you have rather, some information about some recent press clippings or events, and you can quote some of that in talking to people, they'll very quickly correct you. Give to get. Very helpful. This takes us very close to the very end of this presentation. I want to give you your homework now. I'd like to refresh a couple key points. Number one, planning is essential. Planning is critical at every step. You have to know why you're going after the information, who's most likely to have it, feed your giraffe, figure out whom do they know who might know the right people. Use the critical questions like I wonder how or I wonder who, because you're not asking a direct question. You're kind of wondering, and they might fill you in on who you might talk to. You might even get an introduction to the right sources. But before you contact them, make sure that you do the research about both their entity, their organization, and themselves, so you can plan a call or a contact that will make them comfortable and help them feel like you're filling a need for them, whether that's an ego need or an interest need, or you're sharing information that you got from someplace else without perhaps revealing sources that you shouldn't. It's always very interesting to use information gathering techniques of this kind to share information across sources when that does not violate confidences. After you've done all of that, you're ready to make your contact. But your first contact, folks, again, is Fred. You're just trying to get information, establish your bona fides, and be ready to talk to them next time. Then when you have your collection conversation, be certain, then, as in Fred, to use the hourglass, to use statements instead of questions, etc. So now you're ready to go. Go to a local shopping mall with a friend. This is our recommendation. First sit down and teach a friend these techniques. If you teach something, you'll know it better, won't you? Then take your victim, your friend, your enlisted helper, however you want to phrase it, and walk into a few stores. Before you walk into them, think hard about the context. What is the context of your contact? Why are you going into the store? Preferably, you're going into a store you really want to buy something. That gives you a good context. But before you decide even which store to walk into, kind of cruise through the shopping mall or the strip of stores or wherever you are. Look at a few clerks and a few others just in passing and see, just from your own gut sense, if you will, do they look friendly, talkative, open? Try to find someone that you think will talk to you who's not terribly busy, because you don't want to get in the middle of a conversation and then suddenly discover that you're keeping them from their work. Once you've targeted them, have a Fred conversation with them. Remember, you're just trying to find out a little bit about them. You might ask about products and so forth. That's using your question for conversational flow. And then make a few statements. Have you ever worked in a store? Did you ever know anybody who did? Make statements about, oh, this must be interesting work, or you look like you might be a local university student, or I had a job like this and when I was in university. Didn't pay me much, though. But don't go too far into this. Walk away, do something else, and then come back to that person. Oh, get lunch or something. Come back an hour later, half an hour later, if you can, and then have another conversation. You'll be an old familiar face now, friendly. They'll recognize you. They'll talk to you. And this is your collection conversation. Your target is to find out, believe it or not, how much money they make per hour or per day. Oh, for some reason my computer started going on autopilot here, so my apologies. Let me go back a little bit. So let me go down to the end. Forgive me. Apparently, when I don't pay attention, it goes on autopilot. So we're back here on our homework. So the important point is to not ask any questions and use no deception. Tell no lies of any kind. And see if you can gather some information by simply making statements. Okay? Then kind of debrief. What did you get? Was it worthwhile? Could you go back there? And how did it help to work with your friend? A lot of times, your friend can ask questions, and you don't need to. But again, don't ask questions dead on the target. Use statements for that. So how do you know if your network is working? If others see you as a valuable source, and when people come to you with the latest and greatest, because they know that you always seem to have information that they need when they reach out to you. Remember that no matter how important information seems, the human source network is by far more important. That's it, basically. There's a lot of other techniques that we teach in our broader class, and they're listed here. This may be helpful to you in terms of thinking about how to get conversations flowing. These are techniques you stack in the hourglass. But at this point, what I'd like to do is really ask you if you have any questions and see if we can answer them.
So, thank you very much, Kent. Indeed, as you've said, please post your question. Use the chat function on the bottom side of your panel and give Kent a hard time. One question came already up while you were talking, Kent, and this is about the PDF or the slides, whether they're available or not later on. And yes, indeed, they will be made available on our website. That's the ICI website, so simply wait and you can see them pop up there.
And the advantage there is that they won't randomly change slides. I have a mouse cursor flaw going on and getting repaired, and I think that was driving my slides. My apologies.
No worries. Okay, here's the first question for you, Kent, and I repeat it first so everybody can understand what we're talking about now.
Sure.
What's about the term social engineering? And is there a difference actually, or is it just an ethical, semantic issue, or what's your take on that? The
principle, I think I might even know from which participant this came, as I know a couple of these people. The term social engineering is typically associated with hacker activity, if you will. And there is a difference, a primary difference in ethics. Social engineering is not something that is designed to deliver win-win or win-neutral results for both parties. Social engineering is designed to give benefit only to the social engineer, and it's usually used as part of a set of intertwined deceptions in which you're trying to get information that allow you, the hacker, to penetrate a network of some kind.
But I think the point is there a different methodology behind it, or is it just a different purpose, i.e. the intention of doing harm?
You can use social engineering, you can use elements of conversational intelligence in social engineering, but one of the key differences in methodology is you're not building a network, you're just trying to get information on a one-time basis. That changes everything. Using this technique, you can build a network, you can go back to people over and over and over. They never feel used, they always feel that their conversations with you have value and they're willing to share because it's clear to them that you mean them no harm.
Okay. So here's the next question coming up. How would you detect lies or even deception within a conversation? Because obviously it's nice to chat and nice to talk, but in the end, the whole purpose of the exercise is to get some good information. People do lie, I guess, right? So how do you know?
In other words, how do you know if they're lying to you?
Yes, I think that's a question here.
Truth is normally shared with people that you trust, and the purpose of this process is to build sufficient trust to garner truth. However, people can still choose to lie to you, And within the context of a relationship that is ongoing, it becomes more and more difficult to maintain those lies. So they won't lie over time. But if you're worried about a particular collection conversation in which you might have been lied to, the best remedy for that is to have multiple sources and multiple conversations with them, so you can vet what one source says against how others respond. If you're in person with them, there are some techniques you can use that we teach in our Detecting Deception course in body language, where their eyes go, their hands go, facial expressions, etc., that are dynamite to detect if somebody's lying. You can also use techniques if they're writing answers back to you. However, within a specific conversation on a one-time basis, people can lie to you if you don't have a relationship that's strong enough so you can detect it, and if they feel comfortable lying to you, they'll get away with it, very possibly, unless you rely on multiple sources.
Okay, sounds a little bit to me as if it's a lot about experience, right? Simply knowing
it's more
this
about
kind
experience than anything else, but also not relying on one or two calls.
Yeah, so it's more art than science, I guess. Okay, here's the next question. It's, how much time does it really take to prepare this kind of conversational intelligence collection, i.e. the actual engagement question is, right? Any rule of thumb or any idea what you're talking about?
Well, in our course, as I suspect you know, Rainer, we do take our students to a shopping mall, and we actually do something similar to what we described in our homework assignment. And over the course of 2 hours with no access to the internet, we are able to get a lot of information from people by making a couple of visits to different shops. So that's actually more time than is required on a normal basis for a single source. Simply because with experience you get quicker at it. You're able to parse what sort of things you need to say and who to approach and how. But I will tell you that the biggest part of any research project that is well done, if you're using primary sources, is the preparation. And it does take time, but if you look at the overall research project, let's say you need to have 10 good interviews. If you spend, say, a week trying to get those 10 good interviews by calling dozens of people and trying to trick them into talking to you, you might eventually get your 10 good interviews through deception, although you won't feel good about it at night. And you may not be able to ever use that source again. If, on the other hand, you spend the first half of the week or the first 2 days preparing, and then you make calls that are very carefully staged, you'll get those 10 interviews with fewer calls. So it's not going to take longer than the more conventional approach. It's just simply more effective. And with experience, it runs much faster.
Okay. Well, it's a long answer, but I think pretty much the idea is to give a kind of rule of thumb here. So say for 1 hour of conversation you need X hours of preparation. Is there anything you could sort of throw in like that?
I would say an hour per an hour.
An hour per hour, okay. Good. Next one is about the actual participant asked about the company's policy does not allow to contact direct competitors' employees. So how would you go about that? Obviously, you can't simply pick up the phone and arrange a meeting or chat over the phone. So if it's a valuable source, true, but if you're not allowed to contact them, and especially not now in a kind of elicitation environment, how would you go about that?
Oh, well, there's a host of companies with such policies. If your company's policy will not let you call the competitor, that's actually fine, because you can get excellent information from that competitor's suppliers and customers. You can also get excellent information from the people that regulate that competitor. Think of it this way. Who are the entities that can cause that competitor joy or pain? Who are the labor unions, the activist groups, the press, the people that buy and sell? Lenny Fold had a famous statement, wherever money changes hands, so does information. That's a true statement. If you think about the stakeholders, not the stockholders, but the people who stand to win or lose if this company does well, or who have a real interest in them, all of those people will have good, useful information. If your legal department will let you talk to competitor B about competitor A, you also have a leg to stand on, because competitor B will often share a great deal about competitor A.
Okay. Let's talk about the ethical and legal issue. Do you think that you already, well, at least in specific countries, let's say, like the US, is it already illegal to go for sensitive information using this methodology?
Typically, the laws, both in the United States and the European Union, at least to I'm not an attorney, so I'm not qualified to speak on that basis, but I certainly have worked with a number of attorneys on this. The laws seem to indicate that it's more about how you're getting the information than what you're getting. There's an exception to that. If you build such a good relationship that someone says, let me send you a confidential document that's marked confidential that has details, just turn them down. You don't want that document. Even if they're willing to share it, you shouldn't have that document. But in terms of how you get the information, the methodology is fair and square and does not violate laws.
Okay. I think that's a long answer to a short question, because it must be very specific to a case and whether there's any damage or economical damage done or how you approach somebody. I agree with you. We're not into legal debate here, but definitely it's something you should at least check out with your company's legal department in the end, right? If you want to go for a campaign like that and make it a methodology that's appreciated and used even throughout the company. I full-heartedly agree that there is something you should plan for initially. Next question. Here's a question about the actual collection person. So who's good at this elicitation game? What could you talk a little bit about skills, personalities, or competences somebody should have?
Certainly. The most important thing is you don't want to get someone who shoots from the hip, someone who does the ready, fire, aim process instead of ready, aim, fire. This suggests that extroverts, people who like talking to people, can do this only if they can think like an introvert. If an introvert walks into a room full of people, they usually start out by thinking, gee, what could I say? To whom should I speak? And what should the conversation touch on? If an extrovert walks into that same room, they tend to say, let the party begin. They don't even bother trying to, in many cases, and I'm an extrovert, so I think I know, they don't even bother trying to plan. You need to plan. So that is important. You also need to be very detailed in your planning and have a tendency to want to write things down, both during the planning phase and during the collection phase.
Okay, and if it's more like an HR topic here, is there any kind of special breed around who should be trained, educated to do this kind of collection? Or is it just anybody in the company with a kind of tool set, as you've said, and sort of a consciousness of what you're doing and what you're after? Or could you pre-select people to be more efficient and effective in what you in this kind of collection?
You can pre-select people to be more effective. Clearly, if you're gathering engineering information, you'd want an engineer on the phone, mostly because they'll sound more credible. Are you still there?
Yes, sure. Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. Not unsurprisingly, though, the collection technique can be used by virtually anyone in almost any discipline, even if they're not fully versed in that discipline. If they do some research first, there are exceptions to that. We found that in pharmaceutical, for example, you need a PharmD or an MD to be doing the collection. And that's true in some certain other very concentrated disciplines. In general business, however, virtually anyone in business with the appropriate training and preparation can do the work.
Okay. Good, and I think we're pretty much at the end of it. There's a final question. When and where will you be holding the Conversational Intelligence course in the US during 2014? Well, it's not for me.
Well, tell you what, and I know who sent this. I know you, sir. You get together a handful of friends, and we'll have one in your city.
Okay, so
we teach a lot of these inside companies, but certainly it's dependent on how. We have already somebody else, so that's in addition to you, sir. There's one other individual I'm aware of. So let's get several more, and we'll do it.
No, so the answer is there's no scheduled open workshop, at least from the ICI side of it, in the US for 2014. But we always provide in-house trainings as well. So this is an issue of popping an email, and we can talk about that. The next regular class, and this is pretty much for those who are really, who have some travel chips to burn, I guess. That's coming up in India, in Bangalore, end of this month, actually, end of April. Right. And that's where the next, as we call it, ICI 5 workshop will take place. Okay, I think that's it. We're pretty much at the end of the question stack. Yep, I do not think I missed any. So
okay, thank you.
It's thank you from my side as well as from Ken's side, as you've said. We will make this webinar available on the website as a recorded session, and you definitely can have the slides as well. Simply pop an email and we will take care of that. So enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend coming up, and then let's talk later on again. Thanks a lot, Ken.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye.